welcome to the panel on the consolidation of service providers. Yeah, I think the idea of consolidation can be really cool or potentially somewhat scary, depending on who you ask. And that's why I'm excited to hear from our seasoned panelists. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jason Harris. He's one of the funniest and brightest leaders in our field today. And he's a senior director at Electronic Arts for Worldwide External Development. Jason, come on up.
So thank you everybody for joining us. Very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I know a lot of people are out there singing till the early hours of the morning, so it's great that you made it to this incredibly interesting and highly anticipated presentation. Now, I'm notorious for having tons and tons of data and putting together huge slide decks for my presentation. So I have about 140 slides to go through, and then we'll get into the questions after that. As I said, I have about 140 slides, which we'll go through, and then we'll go and ask one question. Maybe we'll have time. No. Then we'll get into the interesting bit. So for those of you that don't know too much about M&A in the industry, in 2016, we saw a record year for overall M&A activity in the games industry with $28.4 billion spent. And when we look at service providers, and a recent survey conducted by the XDS Advisory Committee, 30% of service providers said that they're open or looking for M&A targets. Most of those are in the areas of art and animation. And incredibly, 72% of service providers said they're open to being acquired. So I delved through the archives, I pulled out the stone tablets and transcribed them, and found way back when, that really looked like it started with Technicolor in 2007 that acquired Paprikos to move into the art and animation side. Next acquisition wasn't for a few years until 2010 when Polter Win acquired a QA company. 2011, Virtuos entered the scene with an acquisition of Sparks, and then there was the first acquisition of a developer by a developer of a service provider. 2012, a few other QA acquisitions. Moving on to 2014 is when Keywords entered the scene with acquisitions in QA, video production, localization, and art. 2015, that continued with a few other acquisitions. And 2016, as with the rest of the industry, was really a record year for acquisitions. We estimated that about 65 million was spent on acquisitions of service providers in 2016. And 2017 really hasn't disappointed, with Virtuos acquiring Black Shamrock, a number of acquisitions by Keywords, and other companies such as Sumo Digital, THQ Nordic, and the Specialist Works. And probably a spend we estimated around 33 million to date. So what does that mean? 2016, as with the rest of the industry, we saw a large number of acquisitions, but only 2 more needed in 2017 to be on par with 2016. 2007, 3 more to break a record.
We'll do our best.
So maybe there'll be some deals made today, so after this. And when we look at the disciplines, a quarter of those were art companies, followed by localization, and then mobile development. So that's all the data. We're going to get into the really interesting questions now. As Colby said, my name is Jason Harris, and on the panel we have Harley Zhao with Original Force, Andrew Day with Keywords, and Gilles, and I've been trying to pronounce his last name for 7 years, but Brits are really bad at French, so I'm not going to embarrass myself on stage, but Gilles with Virtuos. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Gilles Langorieux, what's so difficult saying Langorieux?
Anybody else want to try?
Maybe later, maybe later.
Maybe we'll take another 3 or 4 years. So to start off with, be interesting to understand each panel member's stance on consolidation in the industry. So let's start with Gilles.
Well, first of all, I think consolidation, if you look at the root of the word, it's about making things bigger and more solid. Consolidation. So I view it with a positive eye. I think it's a natural movement in any industry. And what's particular about the external development scene in the games industry. It's really how fragmented it is. And if you contrast that with many more mature industries, that fragmentation probably a sign of weakness rather than a sign of strength. So my first look at this is consolidation is a healthy movement. My second approach would be it's healthy for everybody if it's done for the right reasons. And if the strategy which is behind the consolidation leads to better and greater things for all the parties involved. The company which is acquiring, the company which is being acquired, and the different stakeholders in the ecosystem. And maybe later on we can discuss about what that means.
Okay, great. Andrew, what?
Well, actually, Gilles said it all already. So, no, I mean, when we were one of these small service companies, single service line, very dependent on single clients, and we looked in the industry and we saw this massive fragmentation in terms of the service providers. But when you look at the client side, that's very consolidated and they're operating very globally. And you think this is an imbalanced and somehow fragile system. So something has to change. And like Gilles, I think consolidation is natural and it's very healthy. I think the industry needs it. And again, I think consolidation comes in different flavors. I think what we've seen so far has been healthy, and long may it continue.
And when we look to the numbers, consolidation's been in the industry has been happening for about 10 years among service providers. What do you feel the impact has been overall, and especially over the last 2 years?
Impact
on the industry as a whole,
on the industry?
Ecosystem.
I think it's I still think it's getting started, right? The industry as a whole is still pretty immature. You look at other industries, and I think we all turn to the film industry to see what's happened there and how that industry works. And consolidation and establishment of larger service providers happened quite a long time ago, and it works for that industry. I think it's natural that our industry is going to trend a little bit towards that. But not only in the film, TV industry. I mean, it happens in all other industries, more or less. So the impact to date, I think, there's change in the industry. So different people feel differently about what they're seeing because change always brings uncertainty. But I think in terms of where I think that this is going is that it's going to have an impact, not today yet, maybe next year, maybe the year after, and that impact will be where our clients, the game publishers and the game developers, can engage on a more strategic basis with clients, with providers that are bigger and stronger and have I don't know, the global footprint, they have the financial muscle, they have what it takes for you as, and I'm talking to you as coming from EA, for you to feel comfortable that you can commit and partner with somebody that's, you understand the strategy, you can buy into it, you can invest enough time and resource to make sure that our interests are totally aligned. And I think that will be the biggest impact. I don't think we've seen it yet.
Okay. And Harley, what's your stance on consolidation in the industry and your thoughts?
To be honest, we haven't acquired or merged any other studio yet. We were in discussion with several during the last several years. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure yet why we need to do that. If we look into our history, we expanded to, now we have 1,300 people. We expanded by ourselves. Mm-hmm. We set up in different locations and we grow organically by ourselves. When we consider like a consolidation or merge, with other people, one thing always concerning us is why we need to do that. What is the real reason behind that? Is a business reason, because of the company needs to, to be listed or this to be get bigger to attract more financiers or any other reasons behind that. As I was the artist, I started the company a long time ago. When I look at it, it's all about like passion. If you can attract people who love this, so it's not only a pure business kind of thing for me, for myself. So we haven't done anything like that yet. But one thing we are looking into is if there is any area that we are weak, we are very weak. If we are the weakness, where the weakness is, if there is some good, studio maybe will help us to grow in that area, we may consider, but not yet. So it's more like Gilles and Andrew's, maybe they know much better than me on
And
that.
do you feel that consolidation has had a positive impact on the industry so far, or you'd have liked to have seen these companies remain independent?
I would say, most of the studio, it's only my personal opinion. Most of the game studio, like the creators, the creative people, they want to work with those people. They want to work with the team that they can trust. Do they really want to work with a super big team, with a big company? But actually, you want to work with the, that small group of people which you have the experience or you like to work with. But of course, working with a huge or big entity, it's more stable. It's more you get much more other like benefit. But from the creator's point of view, I doubt it, to be honest. Like the developers, what they are thinking, are they do they really need it, or they don't? I mean, or if you merge and acquire them together, if you change a lot of things, are they, the studio, will they still be attractive for the developers? I don't know. It's just my opinion. So.
Okay.
I think in a way that comes down to the point that Jill was making. It depends on the flavor of the consolidation, right? Mm-hmm. So if the consolidation results in a restriction of choice, or if the creatives can't work with the team that they really want to work with, then I think that's probably a bad thing, right? Because we know what this industry needs. It needs passion, it needs creation, it needs creativity, it needs flexibility and all the rest of it. But I think the flip side of it is, and I feel this very strongly because we were one of these $3-5 million companies. And it does feel pretty fragile out there, when you don't really know when your next project's coming along. And so I think for the sake of the industry, if you can somehow create a consolidation which doesn't restrict the ability of the game developers to work with the best minds, the best art talent, the best engineering talent, and allow them to do that, but actually provide a safety net for those same entities, those same service providers, so that they can just take more risk, they can invest more in the future because they're part of a bigger entity that can take a slightly different view of life. So that's my view.
I think a big concern I've heard quite often is with all the consolidation in the industry, if one company, a few companies are acquiring a lot of the biggest providers and something happens to them, a scandal, financial issues, then all of those providers could suddenly disappear from the industry. So how are you ensuring that you ensure that the company is stable for the long term, these providers remain around for the long term?
You're addressing it to me?
Jill in the early stages, Andrew?
Yeah, obviously, I like to think that we are a prudently managed business. We've deliberately gone to seek capital sources that are, I consider, low risk, so not high debt. It's equity funded, right? We listed the company on the London Stock Exchange precisely so that we could go and raise capital from sophisticated investors. So we don't owe any of that money back to anyone. So the leverage in the business is extremely, extremely modest. And it's all done in complete transparency, so that the whole industry can see what we're doing and can form their own view of of the risk associated with it. But of course, we're not just talking about financial risk, you're talking about reputational risk, you're talking about all sorts of other things. So we spend a lot of time really trying to, first of all, make sure that as an organization, we're welcoming into the Keywords families, companies that feel and act in the same way that we do. We think cultural fit is extremely important because it drives behaviors, right? And so if people know how to behave and they behave responsibly and they behave in the best interests of the project, we think that ultimately the risk for anybody in this is minimized because we're all focused on doing the right thing. Of course, we also have a responsibility to trade profitably. We want to be here for the long term. And I think, Gilles getting ready to talk.
Also, let's put things in perspective. I mean, we happily live in a world where we only have 3 choices for when we choose a cell phone service. We only have 1 choice when we want to decide which 3D software to use or which company to buy the 3D software from. And when I look at the list of the competitors we have an internal list of about 300 companies, and I believe the list is even longer than that. So even if Andrew keeps gobbling up companies, 10 per year, in 10 years' time, he would only have gone through a third of that list. And I don't think
He could speed up. Maybe he's got some great financing.
So I think we're still far from that threshold where you could consider, okay, things are getting out of control, monopoly is being formed, right? So there are some things to take into consideration when larger companies, why larger companies want to do acquisitions and why smaller companies want to partner with the larger ones. But as a global, for the global state of the industry, honestly, I think we are facing way bigger concentrations in other areas than the service area.
Okay. And how do you approach, so a lot of these companies you're acquiring were once competitors, and they're used to competing against each other, and now when you're acquiring them, you're bringing them into the same company, they suddenly have to work harmoniously together and get on. So how do you change their mindset from that competitive mindset to we now need to work together, share resources?
I'm sorry, I haven't had that experience.
Probably a question for Andrew then.
Yeah, so I think it starts, like I said, it starts that we're very. It's the most important point for us is to try and make sure that we're inviting like-minded companies into the family, and that's essential for exactly that reason, because we do want people to work together. We want to be able to take the best from within the individual studios within Keywords and be able to configure them together so that they do work together in the interests of the client and the interests of the project. So what I've found, in a way, more remarkable than I would have thought is the way in which people very quickly become friends. Having once been not exactly enemies, because competition can also be friendly, but as soon as they're together in the one company, and the way in which people are able to get on and to share and to understand the situation and the challenges they're facing in delivering great work is really quite remarkable, and I think it's quite refreshing. I think that a lot of companies, and I think if you were to ask them that have joined Keywords, I think they feel that it's a nice position to be in where you're able to share your experience and share the challenges with a whole bunch of people that really understand what it means to live through this.
Yeah. We have a quick poll from all of the companies you've acquired.
Okay.
To see if that's so we're seeing from the data I presented, you saw that there's acquisitions of service providers by service providers. Some service providers are being acquired by developers and publishers, and others are being acquired by IT outsourcing companies that have no experience with the games industry. What's your thoughts on different companies acquiring, the impact on the industry that's happening, that's having? Harley, any thoughts there on Are you worried about also developers, publishers acquiring some of the providers, IT outsourcing, huge IT outsourcing companies moving into?
Yeah, I think we were approached by several companies, like big listed companies before, like several years ago. They come and ask us if we are willing to be acquired or merged. I think the purpose of this requirements or this approach, they approach us because they want to expand their business. They want to expand into the game industry, which most of them, they don't understand it at all. I had a conversation with them, and though I don't want to be acquired or merged at that time, but I still had to talk with them. But I think they have very little knowledge of the game industry at all. So I think those people, if they acquire studios or service providers, their goal is I would say purely, mostly would be like more from the financial point of view, to get into an industry, to expand their revenue or that. I don't think it is a good thing for the industry, to be honest. Why IT outsourcing company want to acquire people in the game industry? Because it's too different. And it's hard to communicate, I would say. And the service, when we raised our first round, actually 5 years ago in China, our investor asked us a question about, do you think you can be like a 3,000 people company? At that time, it is one of their big questions. And they are looking into this business comparing to the IT outsourcing business. They thought, it may be the same. And this is why a lot of the IT outsourcing companies, huge ones listed, they want to expand into this industry. But I think it is too different, very, very different. It's more creative. We have, where we need to deal with the arts, animations. It's more creative. It's not programming. It's not that simple. Or, of course, programming is not simple, but it's different. It's more subjective. The things that we are doing is, it's just different. So I don't think that would be a good thing for the market. Yeah.
I'd like to follow on a point that Harley brought up earlier. He made the point about how important passion was, and who will disagree? Besides passion, in order to do great things, and games are not getting any smaller, I think a lot of us agree on that. Because games are not getting any smaller, besides passion, you also need organization and resources. And this is where I think there is really a win-win potential with more consolidation happening, because some of the smaller entities might benefit a lot from an organization that allows them to do bigger things, and from the resources which allow them to train people better, invest more in R&D, tackle bigger projects than the projects that they can currently tackle alone. This is what we did when we acquired the Sparks team in Vietnam. So at a strategic level, our business is about becoming the largest and the best content provider for video games. We had a weakness in animation. We identified that there was this great team in Vietnam, 50 animators, which was facing difficulties. And we saw that they had the passion, they wanted to continue doing something bigger and greater in Vietnam. And we had the organization and the resources to help them achieve that. So 2012, we acquired that team of 50 people. 2017, they're now about 300. They work both in movies and games. And they benefit greatly from the type of organization that we put on the table, and the ability to work with multiple clients that they didn't have before. To me, it's the type of consolidation that I would like to reproduce, because I think it's win-win. It was a good win for us, a good win for them, and also the parties around us, potential employees, potential clients, they benefited because that we now have another great studio in Vietnam.
Can I add one
Yeah, you
thing
can add
to Gio's? So, cause we have experience of in the movie and animation industry. We have around 600 people doing movies and animations. It's another business unit. But when my experience is different. I mean, from the games to the movies, it's very, very different. Like on the production wise, on the movie side, it is very, very hard to outsource, I would say, because you need a full team. I mean, I'm talking about like more animation, like feature instead of like visual effects. So when you look at it, the organization, that you want, if you want to produce big movies or like TV series, you need most of the people in one location because technology-wise and the pipeline-wise, it is very, very complex. It can hardly be separated. Like games is, for me, it is different. Though we are not doing any like full game development, but we are mostly doing arts and animation. When you look at it, it's more scale-wise, it's smaller, and it can be separated, and it can be sent out to like different vendors, different studios to work on, and put them together later, like by the producers, But the movie and animation is different. So this is why in the movie industry, actually, when you look at it, most likely it will, the project is a full pipeline project. If we want to outsource, you want to outsource a full episode or a full movie instead of a part of it. So yeah, I think this is one of the reasons why when I look at the game, the consolidation or merge, it's still, when you merge smaller studios together, they are still providing the same function as they are separated. Of course, you will get more benefit, like, stable, like, you can share the knowledge, but they are still more separated instead of like you really merge them together to make a full seamlessly pipeline. So yeah, it's my output for this.
So there's a lot of comments around stability, since consolidation brings stability. So when you look at the different disciplines, art, animation, VFX, engineering, which of those areas do you feel could really benefit from further consolidation or benefit the most? There's been a lot of consolidation in the art side, on the localization side, quite some consolidation on the QA side. What other areas could benefit?
I think bringing the different disciplines together more would be a major benefit. With games becoming larger and bigger, co-development by involving teams of the different disciplines is becoming more and more necessary. Because of that, you can't remain in silos, and you need to bring those teams together and make them work together as one team with clients so that they can be more autonomous. So that's one of the goals that we have. We want to bring teams from different specialties inside the fold and make them work together better.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think, obviously you've seen the sort of acquisitions that Keywords has made. We've seen that we've put a flag in the space of engineering as well, and we will be continuing to make investments in that space. I'm a big fan of balance. We want a balanced portfolio of services that we can stitch together or allow our clients to contract for on an individual basis, whatever works best for the client in the project. But there is something else I want to say. I want to talk about the people, right? So what we've found most refreshing in a way is that we're able to attract better talent, more talent. We're able to spend more on training. We're able to invest in retention, and one of the real benefits as well of having scale is that because we're now working with pretty much all the leading game companies, we're able to bring work to this very talented pool of incredibly passionate people. And so they get to work on the coolest games, and to do some of the real sort of leading edge co-development work and so on, which I think is great. You know, I think a career on the services side is now something that people can really, really look forward to for, you know, their entire career, or at least as an alternative to moving from game dev to game dev, following the work around the world.
If you could answer, what's your ultimate goal with these acquisitions and kind of long-term strategy?
So the mission for Virtuos is very simple. We want to be the first company that you think about when you ask yourself, who can help us make better, bigger games, or who can help us generate more revenue with our games. We're very much focused on the content. We want to be a very strong content production partner. So the goal we have is to complement the skills that we might get stronger in certain skills, and also get closer to our clients by being present in the areas where it is easier or easy to work with us. Those are the two main reasons why we're talking from time to time to potential acquisition targets.
And Andrew?
For us, it's similar, but a little bit different. So we are building a global game services platform that we want to make available for game developers and game publishers around the world. We want to, you know, we're not building our own IP. We never will. That's not what we're in business to do. We're very happy being a service provider, and we think that's a great mission to have. So, you know, the end game is to get to this point where we have a platform, and we continue to invest in that platform, but that platform allows companies to engage in a more strategic manner than the current sort of tactical outsourcing that's going on.
Charlie, any comments? No, you haven't.
For us, our strategy, maybe we're still continuing to expand, organic, by ourselves, So we are considering to invest more in the game service business and expand the team because we found that we have several maybe great talent in our company, but they want to move back to their hometown. Or for example, that we have a Thailand animator who is super good, and he want to go back to Thailand, to Macau, to Bangkok, and we say, okay, so now you go there, you start a team, and we will invest. So it's a different approach. Mm-hmm. But we started with more we like the talent that we have been working with, and we want them to keep them in the company, and to expand the business in this way. So yeah, this is how we are doing things now.
Okay, great. Jaime, I think you're up first.
Right. So I've heard a lot about stability and predictability and talent here, which is great to hear. But I'm very interested in what are the panel views on what is the consolidation going to do with the service industry capability for innovation. And I'm not just talking about transactional 2 months innovation, but long-term, big project, 3-year, multi-million innovation.
I'll go back to my comment earlier about resources. I think that if you provide more resources to smaller players, typically one thing that happens is they can invest more in R&D. So you can have a couple of guys with a great idea, but not the resources to fully flesh it out. I think that's probably the first win that comes out of that can come out of consolidation done well.
Let's, in the interest of time, let's take a question over here.
Jill, you gave the perfect example of how consolidation benefits the company that is acquiring and the company that's being acquired with the Vietnam example. But my question is, there's missing a piece of the equation, and it is us, the studios, the publishers. So is centralization a natural consequence of consolidation? And how do you, as companies in the market acquiring services providers, see the impact to us as studios? Probably we like working with studios because we like that company personality, profile, ways of working. So it's a two question. So do you see centralization as a natural step of consolidation, and how that impacts studios that develop the games?
No, I'm not a huge fan of centralization, and I don't think in the example I mentioned, I mentioned that things had been centralized. Actually, I'd like to share some of the backstory behind that acquisition, because the reason we went to Vietnam is because we had a client who was asking us to provide them with more animation services, and we couldn't find enough suitable animation talent in China. So by partnering up with the team in Vietnam, we were able to solve that particular client's need. So the start was solving a client need. We always have the client in mind. Consolidation done well should preserve the interest of the different stakeholders, with the clients being very important stakeholders. Existing clients should feel like what they have built with the vendor is not going to go away, is going to stay, and could get better. And new clients might be able to benefit from the services of that company because it expands. I've seen it happen a number of times. And I will say that this could be a criteria for judging whether consolidation is well done or not. If you have the existing clients satisfied as well as new clients benefiting from the services, you've done it successfully from my point of view. Would you agree?
Yeah, it was more a general question, and the example of Vietnam, what I was saying illustrates perfectly the benefits of an acquisition of a consolidation. But yeah, I totally agree with you in terms of a client being at the end of the process in one case, or at the beginning of the process. It's going to have an impact, either positive if it is well done, or a different outcome if it is not done correctly. So yeah, that answers my question. So thank you.
I think there's just another point on this as well, and I don't know if it applied in your Vietnam case, but certainly it's applied in some limited instances with keywords and the consolidations that we've made. We've actually saved businesses for the clients. So the clients were working with these businesses, but these businesses were not healthy. So by welcoming into the family, by implementing some changes, by making more investment, we preserve the talent and the delivery capabilities for the benefit of the client.
Right. One last question, Daniel.
Thank you. I'm curious about the strategy and the thinking behind the way you have advertised your brand by the acquisitions of other strong brands. So I think that there's pros and cons to the way you advertise your brand and the brands you acquire. I think you acquired some very strong brands with a good reputation, a very unique identity. So I'm curious behind the strategy and why you decided to go down the route you have.
I'll try and answer it. So we're very proud of the companies that have joined Keywords. Like you say, they've got tremendous reputation. They've been doing this for a long time. They're real expert in their field, and they're very much appreciated by their clients and, of course, by their employees. So when we set about this strategy, which, by the way, we devised in 2009, it's taken us a while to build momentum. But at that point, we envisaged that we would build something that looks a little bit like an advertising agency, right? So a little bit like a WPP or a Publicis, where you put together best-of-breed studios with their own branding, a certain degree of autonomy, not complete autonomy, because we do get and we do integrate kind of behind the scenes. And the reason we do that is because we know very well, to I think it was Harley's point or somebody else's point, that our clients are in a creative business, and they do value the fact that they are buying a particular service from a relationship with a Volta or from a Liquid development or from a Babel Media or whatever it is. So we wanted to preserve that whilst at the same time being able to collaborate and to create something bigger. So, you know, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2, but something a bit more than that, while still, to your point about the brands, while still maintaining that identity and that relationship with the client and with the employees.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for joining the panel.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.